Yeah, there's a couple of areas I want to talk about. One, I suppose, is related back to the issue of the commons and reproduction. And we haven't really talked about one area, which is sort of housing co-ops, but more importantly, we talked about recuperated factories, but not about the squatting movement, you know, which has got quite a lot centrally to do with commoning. You know, in a lot of countries, then housing has become increasingly taken out of people's hands. In the UK, a lot or most of social housing has been privatised, pushing up rents to levels in some cities that people can't afford. Now housing has become an investment rather than a use, so that something like 70% of housing developments in London, are there purely for investment and people don't live in them. And it's treated like some sort of futures market. One area that we should, I think, tie into this is housing. A second point, which I think Chantal raised initially, but actually links back to this discussion of Uber, is the way that time has been increasingly appropriated. One of the tendencies in capitalism, has been to take over not just people's working lives, but actually penetrate into non-working lives. The importance of things like 0 hours contracts, which have been important in the UK recently, is in part that, of course, it reduces people's hours, and you can end up working no hours or randomly hours, and that then doesn't relate back to your reproductive needs, to your housing costs and all the rest of it. But that, rather than being controlled for, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, or whatever the traditional working week is, you're actually controlled a lot more of the time. In fact, you're controlled 24/7. And that's at the centre of a lot of disputes that are going on in the UK. Massimo mentioned the hospital doctors dispute, which is precisely around that. And we know that people were working, outside of a normal working week, but at least that was under some sort of control. And people got paid for antisocial hours and all sorts of things. But there is that penetration going on. A final point, separate, and I was thinking about the transformation that needs to go on. The neoliberals, to gain their transformation, started off back in the 1940s to meet up in a nice Swiss town once a year to discuss their ideas as an alternative to Keynesianism, and cultivate the ideas and try and train their students, and gradually these students penetrated into the World Bank and the IMF and various government bodies. I was having a fantasy that we should do the same, that once a year we meet up in a recuperated factory and we start talking about commoning and recuperation and all fundamentally alternative ideas. Unfortunately, I'm not sure we've got as much time as they had.